This is going to be a fairly quick tutorial on how to use the new template. The new template is designed to look good on all devices and to make it easier to customize it so that you can have the page to look the way that you want it to look. This will be especially useful for newer users that are not familiar with web page programming. The current page is designed to look good on all devices. So if you look and see at the responsinator that kind of shows how it will look on different devices, you can see that it modifies in width and formatting so that no matter what device it's on, it always looks good. If you've got really large song titles, it'll end up condensing it so they stay on the same line, so your voting will show on the same line as well. This is what the template looks like on a web page. Now granted, this isn't the final one that's going to look to the viewers, because a lot of it's going to get modified when it gets uploaded. The new template is semi-responsive design. I felt it would be complicated to change the coding to be fully responsive, and most users do not need a fully responsive website. Just a FYI, responsive web pages can display different content depending on the size of the display window, and you can even modify the web page to look different on different devices like cell phones. I'm not going to go into extreme details on HTML or CSS programming, but hopefully I give you enough information to make a web page that looks awesome with very little work. If you want to learn more about HTML and CSS programming, I would highly recommend w3schools.com for tutorials on just about anything web related. They've got a really great web page with examples, a tutorial, how to go through just about everything that you can think of. It's a great resource if you're wanting to learn HTML or CSS. The first thing you will need is a good text editor or HTML editor. You have to be careful though, because some text editors won't save the file in a usable format. Notepad++ is a good option. You have to be careful with the HTML editors as well. There are some editors that will fix any code that is not HTML, and for the template to work, it has to have some non-HTML code that will get converted to HTML code when it gets uploaded. VS Code and Brackets are both good versions of HTML editors, but if you're fairly new, I would suggest using Brackets because it's a lot easier and has a smaller learning curve. Now that the intro's done, let's dig in. So the first line here, don't delete this first line or move it. It's used to identify how the template is converted once it is uploaded, and that's to keep the old version template and the new version template compatible so that people using the old one can still use it and people using the new one can still use the new one. There are several sections in the template, and each section has comments explaining that section. Depending on the section, the comments are different. In the style section, the comments begin with a / and an asterisk and end with an asterisk and /. So if you look here, this section a comment starts with that and it ends with that. So this whole section here is a comment. In the HTML section, comments begin with a <! exclamation point and 2 dashes, and end with 2 dashes and a greater than sign. This is HTML comments here. That's the beginning and that's the end. So this entire section is a comment here. Comments are just for people to understand what's going on. The code does not use it at all, with the exception of this first line. That first line, it is a comment, but it has to be there. I'd strongly recommend that you don't delete sections that you don't think you're going to need, because later you might change your mind and then it's going to be a pain to recreate the code. The template is designed to display correctly, and it will only show the sections that are relevant for the mode that you are using. The style section is where you change how each section looks, such as font color, size, backgrounds, things like that. Each style has a tag that is associated with the section of the web page. If you want to change the style of a section, such as font, size, color, backgrounds, this is where you'd actually change it. So the style section starts with the style and then ends with the style closing bracket. All the styles is designed so that you can set the configuration for several sections just by typing it in one place, and it will update all the sections at the same time. That way you don't have to retype all the information over and over again. So this first section is just for your base configuration. This is what kind of sets it up initially to become responsive, and sets your font and the font color and how it's aligned. The body section is where you'll define how the overall page looks, such as the background or background image. If you're going to use a background image, then it has to be hosted on a secure server or it might not display. The stock template sets the background color to black. I would caution you to think about using light colored backgrounds or a background image that is light in color, since most of the users are going to be viewing your page in the dark and you don't want to blind them. Bright colors and images look good on the monitor, but in the dark it is totally different. You can display background images in several ways. I'll show you one of the more common methods where the image will stretch across the whole screen and keep repeating to fill down the screen. So if you're going to do the background image, then you'll delete the comment at the beginning and the end to use that section. Then you'll set your background image, and we want this to repeat, but we only want it to repeat going down, and that is defined by -y. The background size, we want it to go 100% wide, but we want the rest of it to just keep repeating down, so we'll set that to auto. And so this is the image where it's going to be Holly, and it just goes down, and with the brackets program, if you save, then you can actually see what that's going to look like. And you see how it has the Holly, and it just repeats down. Now you can see here how the text doesn't look good here, so if you use this, you could go in and change the font color, but you would only have to change it in one place, and it would change the font for everything. I wouldn't recommend a background like this just because it's got so much white in it that it would be so bright when they're looking at it, but I did it just for demonstration purposes so you could see how it is. The next section, this div section, just identifies some initial text sizing. The header image content. At the top of the template is a section that you can put in a header image if you want, and to define how that is. This isn't where you actually put it in, but there's a small section up there, so if you want to change the background color of just that section or whatever. Most of the pages sections are set at 90% so that you get a border on it, so it doesn't stretch all the way across. It just gives you this little space at the side. Otherwise these would go all the way across, and I think it looks kind of funky when it cuts the whole page across. I think it looks a little neater when you got a little border. But you could change that border if you want, make it go all the way across, or even shorter if you want. All of these have identifiers that correlate to a div section down below in the actual page. So if there's a section that you want changed, you refer up to this section to see the tag, and that's where you would change if you want to change the way that the color or text or whatever. Like for example, this text is the gray, so if we wanted to change the text to a different color, we could change it here. Say we want it to be blue now. And as you see, I changed it in one place, and now all of your informational text is blue just by changing it in one place. So if you wanted to change it in, you only have to enter it in one place. The footer section is just to change how the footer looks at the bottom. The intro, there's another section that has text that's identified by intro that most people would probably have a different color. The HR separator there's a separator on the page that you could use how you want, and that's this green bar here. It's got a slightly rounded edge, the size, and it's green in color. This is where you change it if you want. If you wanted it to be less round or more round, you want it to be wider or narrower, how high you want it, and if you want the color to be something different, you can change it here. The playlist container is where your playlists are going to display. So all of your songs, the list that they're going to see is going to be here. So this one here, you probably don't want to format anything other than maybe the text color, and possibly the size. The RF titles, it's only needed if you're going to want to change the titles, and the RF titles is this section here where it says playing now and that red line going underneath it. Next selection and the selected songs. Number of selected songs. That's the RF titles, the titles of each section. Playing now is the text that shows how it's the current song that's playing. So this one, the font color is white, but if you want to change it to a different color, you can. The R table section is to define the table where the lists are going to show. So you really shouldn't modify this at all. That's just the basic formatting to get it to show. The cell vote playlist, it's used to configure the table where the RF list will show when you're using the voting mode. You shouldn't modify this too much other than font size, border, if you want a border, or the cursor. The cell vote is used to configure the table where the list is going to show when you're using the voting mode, and that's just the actual vote section. It'll show the number 1, 2, 3, however many votes there are. The jukebox list is to define how the jukebox container is going to go. So if you're using the jukebox mode, obviously this is a little bit different because you don't have a voting column. So this one's a little bit different, but you could set the font size and the color and stuff here if you want it to be something different. After hours, when the Remote Falcon is turned off, there's an option that you can have a message showing when it's not running. So that's up to you. If you want to change how that looks, it would be in this section. The next three are to format how you want the button to look. Down at the bottom about going to your web page. The enter request successful is used for error messages. If it's a successful message, what the color is. So in this case, it's a green color with off-white text and then the size of the text. So you can set how that message looks here. The text actually goes in the body of the HTML file. This is one that if it's an error message, so the error messages is in orange, and the text color is the same white and it's the same font size, but you could change it. So now we're going to get into the actual template. So it starts off where you're going to enter your show title if you want. If you want a picture in your header, then you would just put your header image here. And so for that, you could put, and like I said before, you have to have an image that's on a secure server or it probably won't show up. So if you want an image, you could just put it in this section here, and then you can see here's how it is, and right here's where that image will go. And up at the top, if you want to change the size or anything like that, in that top section titled Header Image Content, you'd go up to the section that says the header image content, and here's where you'd line it. Maybe you have a big picture and you want to make it smaller, you want it to align it left or something. That's where you would identify how it looks on the page, and then down here is where you just configure the actual page. So if we save this, now you can see that we have an image. Now in this case, that image is rather large. I would probably make that image smaller so that it would fit on the page a little bit better. But if you look, this image will automatically change size depending on the size of the screen. So if they're looking at it on a little screen, it's still going to look good. On a big page, I don't like the way that looks. It's too big. So you could modify it to where it will only show a maximum size. But I'm not going to go into how to do all the coding for that. But just so you can see that that's a possibility. So the intro, this is just where you're going to put an intro or title. And that's going to be, let me put this over here. So that's right here, your intro title, whatever you want to do. And like I said, if you want to change the size or font or color, you'd go up to the section on top titled intro and you'd change it there. So the next section is a description of the show. So we previously changed the font, but that's how you'd change the section for that. Then I have the separator. Like I said, you could change that if you want. And then we have the playing now. You put the text. If you want to change what that actual text says, you can change that in there. But the formatting you change up in the section. This section here, don't change. This here is what's going to show the currently playing song. Now, if you want to remove the whole section and move it somewhere else, copy the entire thing from the beginning to the end of the div, and you move it anywhere in the page. But don't delete it, or you're not going to get the currently playing song to show. This section is going to be your after hours message. So if Remote Falcon is turned off, it's going to require either manually turning it on or off inside FPP or Xscheduler. But if it's turned off, then this message will display instead of the now playing. So you could have something to show what your hours are, and that's this section here. So you can put what the hours are. There, James has a script that you can, in your playlist, you can turn on and off Remote Falcon by putting a lead in and lead out into your playlist, and that way it'll automatically turn on and off this. And the part of the reason for that is some people use FPP and Xschedule for like landscape lighting, or they might have just like after hours lighting and they don't want people voting and putting songs so it blink and flash. So this way it will turn it off so the users can't come in and have your song running at 2 o'clock in the morning when you don't want it to be flashing and bothering the neighbors. So this section here is only going to display if you're using the jukebox mode. There's no need to delete it if you're using the voting mode, because it won't display. And you might change your mind later, and if you change your mind, then you're going to have to go in and recreate this code. So it's fine to leave it in there, and it'll only display if you need it. So the next section, it's used for the instructions that you want if you're using jukebox mode. So and it's got two sections for instructions for the jukebox mode and for the voting mode, because some people might go back and forth, and this way you don't have to change your instructions whether using jukebox mode or the voting mode. All you have to do is just switch the mode and the correct instructions will show up. So this will show your instructions in this section. And again, this will only show based on the mode that you're using. One thing that is a neat feature is that in your code you can use the variable of queue depth to display in the error message the queue size. That gives the users a little more information into the reason for the error. So if you change it in your Remote Falcon web page, this will display correctly to the user. So if you want to change it in the middle of the show, if it's busy, you can reduce the number. If it's not busy, you can increase it, and the users will see that correct number, so you don't have to go back into the code to change it. This section here is for the instructional for the voting, like I mentioned. Then we have another separator, and you can move those wherever you want. This here is the section that's going to display all the songs and the votes. So you really don't want to change anything in here. And like I said, this will only show if you're using the voting. It won't show if you're using the jukebox, and if you change your mind, it's there for you to use. This next section is only going to display if you're using the jukebox mode. It's a little bit different format. The section down here is for the error messages. And this is a nice enhancement that James added, is there's exposing a lot more of the errors that could be incurred, and gives the user a lot better feedback. So the first one here is if they have a successful request. So in here, the only thing that you need to change would be the text. Don't change anything else in here, because you'll break the messages. You can move it if you want it to appear in a different spot, so you can move the entire section if you want the error messages to show somewhere else. But don't change the code that's in here. The next section is just for an unexpected error. Just in case something comes up that we didn't think about or James didn't think about, this is an error message. So this usually shouldn't happen, but in case something happens that was unexpected come up. This error message is going to show if somebody's already requested the song, or if in your settings you have it set to where there can only be a certain number in the queue to prevent repeats, and they select one that is already in the queue, then this message will display. If the queue is full, then this will display, and it will even tell them what the queue depth is. Like I mentioned earlier, you can use this variable in your messages. The next one, if they're not within the location, it's going to tell them where it is. And on any of these error messages, if you want to change the text, that's perfectly fine. I would just caution against changing any of the tags that are in it. But the text portion itself, that's yours. You own it. You do what you want with it. The next section is if the person tries to vote on the same song, or tries to vote again that they already, and you only can vote once per round, then this information will come up. And that's the end of the error messages. Then it gets down another little separator, and then it has the footer text. If you want information in there, body, down at the bottom. And then a tag if you want to add your website. If you want to change this to be your website, then change this. If you're not going to do that, I would recommend commenting this out, because most of your users really don't care about what Remote Falcon is unless they have lights. But this would be, for you to put your website. And the bottom section here is for any of your social media stuff. If you have, any of the social media and you want to put it on there, you'll just have to change these href tags to point to your actual page. These are just dummy informations that are in there, because obviously we don't want it, so you have to do it. And then if you're not using any of those, you comment those out, and that later on you might get one. You might get a LinkedIn account or something like that, and it'll be there. But if you just comment the whole section out, it won't show. So that's pretty much it. I hope this helped you, and I hope you're able to make a lot nicer pages, and it's a lot easier. If you have any questions, post it in the Remote Falcon forum, and hopefully I get a chance to take a look at it. Good luck and enjoy.